Sometimes I find myself working on a cue that's, it's fine. Like, everything's in place. It's really working, but I don't know, it's just kind of missing a little extra something. Or, maybe I get stuck and I need a shot of inspiration to really help get that track over the finish line. Well, when this happens, I find that sometimes samples can be the answer. But, I'm not talking about just like dragging a bunch of loops and calling it a day. No, I'm talking about working the samples, flipping them, chopping them, tweaking them so that they don't just kind of sit on top of the cue, but they actually belong in the cue. And that's what I want to show you today. Because I've got a cue that's in a pretty good place, but it just needs some extra love. And I'm going to be working right in the DAW. I'm going to open up Splice. I'm going to pull some samples in and load some things into Serato Sample and walk you through my process for using samples, how I incorporate loops, one-shots, and maybe sprinkle in a few mixing tricks whenever I have a cue that needs a little extra zhuzh on this week's episode of the 52 Cues podcast. What is happening, everybody? This is Dave Kropf, and welcome back to another episode of the 52 Cues podcast, where each week we talk about all things production and library music. So whether you're just starting out or maybe you're already getting placements, I promise you, you are absolutely in the right place. Now, today's episode is made possible thanks to the continued support of our member subscribers of 52 Cues, who are composers just like you, working to write better cues and find success in the sync music industry. And 52 Cues is there to help make that happen with live streams, workshops, Zoom feedback sessions, tons of archives, pitching to real music libraries, and a lot more. So if you're curious about joining, you can head over to 52cues.com or, stick around because I'm going to be talking about that a little bit later in today's episode. Speaking of today's episode, I'm going to be jumping into the DAW, opening up Splice and Serato Sample, and I want to show you how I use loops and one-shots to add extra flavor to a hip-hop cue that I am working on. Plus, I'm going to share my thoughts on a reflective piano cue written by 52 Cues family member Cory Lavine. But first, what have I been working on lately? Well, surprise, surprise, modern comedy. And I promise you, this is the last modern comedy cue that I'm going to be showing for a while. This one's called Clocked and Loaded. It came together really, really quickly and actually incorporates some of the sample technique that I'm going to be talking about a little bit later. Very, very straightforward, and incorporates a few guitar techniques using the whammy bar on my Strat. And so here is Clocked and Loaded. So that was Clocked and Loaded. I had a lot of fun exploring guitar textures, and to be honest, it kind of made me want to be a better guitarist, but I also realized that I didn't have to be like Yngwie Malmsteen just to record some really cool guitar parts, especially when I could slow things down and take it one string at a time and use multiple takes. For you family and friends subscribers, be sure to tune in coming up soon because I'm going to be doing a complete breakdown of Clocked and Loaded, and you don't want to miss that. All right, so for today's topic, I thought it would be really cool for me to show you my process on how I use samples kind of in a live situation. I've got a session pulled up with a cue that I put together. It's a hip hop cue. It's kind of in typical ABA type hip hop form here. And it just needs a little extra something. And so I thought it would be really cool to do that and show you my process and how I use samples and how I think about these types of things. So obviously, as a drummer and a percussionist, I'm going to be starting in the drums and percussion. I might, I don't know, add some transitions, and we've talked about transitions here on the podcast before. Maybe some transitional stuff. If we have time, maybe some brass blats and that kind of thing. But let's start with our percussion. Now we have a stock Logic instrument right here. It's called the Trap Heat. And for now, I'm just going to isolate kind of our loudest spot here. Right, this is right towards the end, and I'm going to use this area. And let's bring up some splice. I'm going to start with my hi-hats. I want to layer in a couple of extra layers of hi-hats because as good as that is, you know, I have often found that getting hi-hats from Splice, they're programmed a lot better than I usually do. And programming like stutter hats and trap hats is just a lot of really fine detail work, especially if you're using, you know, Logic, which it doesn't make it as easy as like FL Studio makes programming these really, really easy. So let's go into Browse and let's go into genres. Let's go into trap, and we're gonna go into drums, and let's find some hats. I'm going to set my BPM range. The BPM of my cue is 150. So let's go 145 to 155. All right. And we're just going to start there. And the fact that I put in a tempo should make it loops, but let's make sure that we are using just loops. And let's take a listen. See, hear like all that stereo processing and everything. All right, so let's load it. And for now, I'm gonna pull down so we can kind of hear these together. I dig that. Okay, I really like that first one. So let's go ahead and grab it, and we're gonna load it into the DAW. I'm gonna put it right here underneath, so that we can kind of hear everything together. And you can actually see, and for you audio only folks, we're gonna have a link to the video so that you can check that out. You can actually see the stereo imaging here. And you can see it moving around, which, you know, I could do, but using a splice loop just makes it a ton easier. And let's put the drums. I'm going to duplicate that twice so we can have we're at 150, so I'm thinking in 8-bar phrases. All right, it's a little bit busy, so let's simplify. All right, I'm gonna put this kind of backwards. So I'm gonna put the first half of this first, and then the second half kind of in the second spot. Yeah, I like that little chirp there at the end. I really like that coming in the second half. And so, I mean, that's the first thing we can do is just move things around. And if I really wanted to mix this up, Then I could save that little chirp there at the end, that little burp, that little, little chirp. And I can just use the first 2 bars. Right. And so that little chirp comes at the end of the phrase and creating a longer phrase. I could do this even more. So if I wanted to save the stereo stutters, then I could repeat the first bar. Yeah, I don't know if I dig that though. But if we go, okay, now, interestingly enough, I want to add another hi-hat layer to this. Oh, I dig that. It's a little bit straighter. So let's grab this. It's at 155. I'm going to drag it into Logic, and Logic's going to kind of re-tempo, map it, and see what we got. Yeah, that's super interesting. But I'm going to add an EQ here. I'm going to clean up some of the lower so it's not necessarily stepping on the low end of the kick or the other snares I have, because here is the EQ of my drums by themselves. The other thing I want to do is, let's pull that down in the mix a little bit. We're going to pull that back. We're going to also, let's tuck these back. So this second hip hop hi-hat track, it's a little in the center where it's not in mono, but it's not exactly wide. And I'm going to add some extra width. And so let's bring in a sample delay. This is a trick I use all the time in Logic. When I want things to sound wider, I use a sample delay. So I'm delaying the left side, in this instance, 15 milliseconds. Without it, it's okay. It's right down the center versus wide. Now listen to how that kind of will help that to pop out of the mix. So here are all 3. We've got our drums. Let's add that first. Let's add the new hi-hat. And now let's add the new hat and snare layer. Right? Kind of hard to hear it, but watch what happens when I make that into a stereo sound. Let's go back. That is not sample delayed. With the sample delay. Without it. Here how it just gets lost. All right. So that's a trick that I use all the time. And suddenly, even though I have like 3 hi-hat layers, they're all really working together. Now, if I want to do a little bit more shaping on the hi-hat, this third hi-hat layer, I'm going to bring in a Pro Q, the Pro Q4 specifically, and I want to tuck back some of these highs. So I'm going to hold down Option. I'm going to drag a node to create a dynamic EQ, which just shaves it off just a little bit. And I could even kind of go into spectral mode by clicking that guy. And you can actually see, it's almost like how Soothe works, where it's just tucking down certain frequencies and it's not the entire band getting notched out. And I can make it more detailed, make it less detailed by sliding this guy. So without it, with, all right, let's play those together. Without it. With it turned on. Like I said, it just helps it helps it to tuck back the highs because we've already got a lot of high-end energy coming into that hi-hat. All right, so let's listen to the whole track without our new hi-hat layers. It's all right. Now let's add the first hi-hat layer. Now let's add the third hi-hat layer. Without, with. Oh man, you hear all that extra energy that is coming into the cue. It just propels it forward. And now, with these new layers, we have options when it comes to creating, the sense of musical development as we work through the cue. So if we were starting out just out of the top, if we go back to the top of the cue, what if we brought this in and ditched maybe the hi-hat, and then we can move that forward. It just gives us a ton more arrangement options. All right, and let's kind of edit that a little bit. I don't think I need that either. There we go. All right, so now let's find like a clap loop, because I want to have some extra zhush in the backbeat department. So we're gonna keep in trap, and actually let's just type in clap. Let's see if we can't find a clap loop here. Now, obviously, I could grab a one shot, which is totally fine. All right, let's take that. I'm gonna grab it in, pull that down in volume. And without it, it's okay. Let's add it back. And let's do a little bit of EQing, clean up the low end. Let's say I just want it to kind of pop out of the highs. And now let's add our sample delay trick. But this time, let's do 15 milliseconds to the right. So they're nice and wide, really, really wide. Let's turn off the sample delay, right down the middle. It's fine. Again, it's fine, but when you delay it, it's going to really help separate it in the mix. So listening to the drums themselves, plus the claps with no sample delay. Now with the sample delay, no, on. Now listen with the rest of the drum. That's just the drum part by itself with the new loops, right? Now, obviously, we've got to balance everything, and these aren't mixed, but I've just kind of thrown them on and done some gain staging. All right, so now let's find a whole groove. I want to bring some things into Serato Sample and show you how I use Serato Sample. And I've done a video on Serato Sample before, but let's do, because we have kind of a trap thing going on here. Let's do drums. Let's type in percussion here in Splice. Don't know what our options are going to be. That's cool. Let's see what. Yeah, that works. By the way, one feature that I wish that Splice had, and Splice, if you're listening, I don't know if you're listening, man, I wish I could adjust the BPM right in here instead of working with the Splice bridge, which is a plugin you run in your DAW, which will tempo sync to your DAW's tempo, but I find that I like Logic's stretching algorithm a little bit better than Splice's stretching rhythm algorithm, or flex or warping or whatever. And so what I would love to do is to be able to change the BPM here in Splice so that I could tempo lock everything that we got and then drag in, like turn it off and then drag it in at the native tempo and then let Logic's flex retime it. The reason I don't like running the Splice bridge is not only does it use Splice's stretching algorithm, but because it's locked into like the phrasing in the DAW, every time I hit play, then it kind of restarts the loop and syncing the loops, and it's trying to do some work for me, and it's just a little clunky. One of the things I really like doing is I like running the cue and then just kind of stepping through to see if anything is kind of piquing my interest. But when I go into a tempo which isn't the exact same tempo I'm in, then it's out of time. But anyway, that's just a small thing. All right, I am liking that. That is really, really cool. Let's get an instance of Serato Sample. We're going to create a new track, and I'm going to load in this little loop into Serato Sample, and that is going to bring up my MPD 18. If you look right below me there, I'm going to assign different portions of this loop into Serato Sample. So let's drag it, put it right there, and we are going to set slicer, and we're going to set it there, and let's hit. So we've got the loop loaded in here, and I am hitting on low latency mode there because I've got a lot of plugins and everything. That's cool. I can make it half that speed. And let's see what we got. Just gonna let this cook a little bit. Now let's see what we got with our loops. All right, yeah, that's pretty cool. Let's play around at the 150 tempo. Yeah. Oh, I don't know which I like better. Let's do a double time thing. All right, off we go. All right, see what we think. And while we're at it, let's put on an RC20, which is a retro color. It's going to make it sound like an old like an old sample or an old breakbeat or vinyl or something like that. And this is a XLN audio, I believe. Yeah, I dig that. Let's see what that sounds like with just the drums. That's some claps. Hi-hat. Hi-hat 2. All right, let's turn off low latency mode. Let's turn back on our mastering assistant. Just the drums. First hi-hat layer. Second hi-hat layer. Claps. And now the new Serato sample. Now let's hear it in context. So without our loops, and with our loops. And so again, with these samples, we have just another layer that we can work with. So if we were starting out at the top of this cue, and let's kill the hi-hats here. All right, so we're gonna go forward one phrase and add more layers. In this instance, we added some guitar, we add a little bit more of the drums. And then after a little ear candy moment right there. And now add another layer. We're about to go into our breakdown, and that's when I would bring in this other percussion loop. I could even do some pitching things. Do I want to detune it? And so then we could take these new layers, and when we go forward in our arrangement, we could copy those forward, copy it forward into the next layer. So then we would go into our A section where we return to the A, and we could bring in this second hi-hat loop, and then we could bring in the back half of the first hi-hat loop. And we're going into a little stop down. We're going to clip that out. And again, without the loops, sounds like that. With all the loops, all right. So let's talk about bringing in a one-shot. If I wanted to bring in a one-shot like a brass blat or something like that. Let's go back over into Splice. And we are just going to just do just horn stab. I think it was that guy right there. And I don't need all the other parts of that. So what I'm going to do is let's bring this over into Logic. We're just going to grab the first part of that. So now I can take this and I can drag it and create an optimized quick sampler instrument to essentially make a sample instrument out of it. I'm going to call that a one-shot. Let's go ahead and throw a little bit of reverb on there. We're going to adjust the fade. That up. Pull it down in the mix just a little bit. Remember, it's just there for like ear candy. Right, what else could we do to this? We could add some delay. Do I have any delays on my bus? Let's create a new bus here. So listening to our track again without the loops. With the loops. All right. So that's bringing a one shot. You can do that same idea with an 808 bass. You can do, you could add those to claps and all of those kind of things. I love taking in one shots and making my own little sample. I love making my own sample instruments out of that. And then finally, let's get into some transitional things. Let's find some sweeps that I've already gotten. Yeah, I like that. We're going to bring this in and we are going to put this right into this reverse moment. Anytime I have a spot where I'm kind of floating the beat for a moment, a little drop, I put reverse energy into it. And so if I am dropping, like right there, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, I need to put reverse energy into that. And I think I've talked about that on the podcast before, but let's pull that over. And we're going to actually carry that forward. And then I can take that and use it pretty much anywhere there is a reverse moment. And so earlier in the cue, we had that same kind of thing. All right, let's do a little impact or something. So let's find an impact. I dig that. Let's put it right on the downbeat. So we have that really long decay. So the reverse cymbal was here before, but listening to this little moment without that's without the samples, and here's with the samples. Yeah, you can hear how it has a ton more energy. So here are kind of the basic ways that I will use samples. I'll bring in loops. I will think about how I can chop them up, reordering them. I will do mixing and complementary kind of EQ curves so they're not kind of right on top of each other. I love to use sample delay, widening so that things that are kind of on top of each other at least aren't in the same stereo spread. It's almost like a mid-side approach to this versus just, carving out your EQs. Then I love to bring loops into Serato Sample, chop those up, assign each little segment to its own key, and kind of beat juggling is what I'm doing. Now, there are so many more ways to manipulate samples. We haven't even gotten into like reverse techniques. We haven't gotten into repitching and those types of things. I find that is really helpful when you are doing incorporating melodic loops, harmonic loops, and bass lines and that kind of thing. But because I'm really focusing on percussion loops, because that's what I use Splice most for, this is essentially how I build and use my loops. But what about you? How do you use loops and samples in your productions and in your specifically your library music and your cues? I would love to hear from you. Please let me know. Let me know in the comments below. And I do hope you found that helpful. I realize it was a little stream of consciousness, but if you like that whole kind of process in seeing me work, this is something that I do every single week during our live streams for our family, friends, and neighbors subscribers. And I do weekly live streams, and I get into this type of stuff every single week. Okay, so we are going to take a quick break, but when we return, we're going to be taking a listen to Moments of Truth, which is a reflective piano cue written by 52Q's family member, Cory Lavine. We'll be right back. Every week I talk about how this episode and the podcast and the community, the channel, would not be possible without the amazing support of our family, friends, and neighbors, subscribers of 52Qs, who do pay their actual real-life money to keep all of this going. And in addition to being thriving members of the community, as well as supporting me and Shannon and everything that we're doing here, they also receive extra perks like live streams, workshops, Zoom feedback sessions, hundreds and hundreds of hours of video archives, weekly cue breakdowns, production music almanac, living ebook, and the opportunities to submit to real music libraries. Now, it's free to join 52Qs. You can just go to 52qs.com and sign up, be a member of the community. We would love to have you. It will always be free to join the community. But if you've been watching, or if maybe this is your first time, but if you're wondering, is there a way to kind of level up my production music skills in the industry, meeting like-minded, super friendly, very generous composers? Then why don't you think about subscribing? Memberships start at around $4 a month, and we would love to have you. Again, that's 52qs.com. So that was Moments of Truth by Cory Lavine, and he says this was a reflective cue originally written for one of our briefing room briefs that features piano and percussion. It would be used as underscore behind dialogue. The challenge was creating the right velocities for the piano to be best suited for an underscore without it sounding too brash or too melodic while still maintaining the loudest parts of the cue at our target luffs and peaks at our target peaks. It was a fun cue where I learned a lot. Cory, thank you so much for sending this along. Really, really do appreciate it. And you know, I'm a fan. I'm a fan, and I enjoyed this as well. Just a couple of quick notes. I would add just a little bit of a breath at the top. You know, we talk about wanting to leave like 200 milliseconds at the beginning. It feels like it kind of starts kind of heavy. I still think here at the top, the velocities can be tucked back just a little bit And maybe some of the lower notes, the velocities on those could be down just a little bit, because it still feels a little heavy-handed here at the top. And I would watch your pedaling here. Feels like we got a little bit of a blend, so I would tap that sustain pedal. But I like the way this starts. It's really kind of minimal. And so like right there, when you go, changing the chord, I wonder if that bass line could the velocities can kind of tuck back just a little bit, and that the top notes can move just a little bit more delicately. There are a couple of frequency spikes. They're not very, very loud, I imagine. It's something coming from the reverb, I think. And I like that high kind of almost like a ping. But I wonder if instead of being on the beat, if we could be off, or instead of being on the downbeat, what if we were on beat 2 or 3? Bing, 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 bing. Bong, 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 bong. Just so it's not so much downbeat energy, downbeat energy, downbeat energy. You're starting to kind of play off of each other. Bom, 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 bom. Probably still that high melody can still get tucked back in the mix just a little bit. Going into our B section, it's the same chords, but it felt like a decrease in energy when I feel like we should have been kind of rising energy. Now, if you do want that decrease of energy, then I think here in the B section, what if we put that up the octave and it's really delicate because we're losing the melody? And maybe you take the bass line and move the bass line up the octave or 2 octaves and kind of like switch hands just to mix it up a little bit so that we're not expecting a continuation of that energetic heightening, but we're actually going somewhere new because we're going to turn around and come right back to it here. And I like the shaker. I would probably pull it down in the mix just a little bit. And as I was listening to this, I kind of heard in my mind's ear some like 808 or like 909 or Casio keyboard kind of analog drum sounds, something like almost like In the Air Tonight kind of, the electronic drums at the beginning, not after the dun dun dun, when Phil Collins goes ham or whatever, but the part at the beginning, boop, boom, boop, boop, a little bit of that could have been really, really cool. And then, watch the fade there. That feels a little artificial. Hear how it kind of ducks down. Yeah, so I think this is the velocities here at the end work, but it feels like the same velocities we had at the beginning. And if we think like this is a journey and we're telling a complete story, I think we can get away with the lower velocities at the beginning, kind of pull the energy back and then push to where we really end up kind of on a high note here. And we probably could have gotten away with a little rallentando or fermata. Bom, dum, bom. boom, boom, and then maybe a little ripple or something, so it's not quite so blocked and it's not necessarily overly quantized. Watch your audio tail. We've got a really, really long audio tail, and we want to make sure that it's fading out and it's not going on way too long. As far as the title, I thought the title was stellar. I think that title really, really works. Oh, I did make one note. There was a secondary dominant in here that I felt was a little... Yeah, that chord right there feels a little weird to be all by itself. And if we are going to use that kind of harmony, then let's hint at it earlier in the cue to give it a little bit of context. I think that could be effective. But Cory, thank you so much for sending this along. Like I said, you know, I'm a huge fan of yours, and I really, really do appreciate you. If you're watching this and you would like to have your cue reviewed right here on the podcast, then why don't you head over to 52cues.com, join us in the community, click into our weekly feedback where you can submit your own cue for consideration. Would love to have you, and would love to give you some feedback. And if you want some more in-depth feedback, you can also order up a feedback video by going over to 52cues.com/feedback. And if you are looking for feedback like this on the regular, this is something that we do every single week over in the family group. We have feedback sessions live via Zoom where we all get together and give feedback twice a week. We have two sessions a week. So really do appreciate that. So that is going to do it for me this week. Be sure to tune in next week because I'm going to be sitting down with one of my former drum students, Mr. Ian McClellan, who's now a co-founder of Chordy, which is a physical chord tool designed to help musicians quickly generate chord progressions and spark creativity. We're going to be talking about how Chordy came to be and why having a tangible tool in a digital world is becoming increasingly important, and how something as simple as a chord wheel can be a powerful spark for songwriters, composers, and even us educators. So you definitely don't want to miss that. But until then, I want to thank you for spending part of your day here with me. I know there are a ton of options out there in the YouTube and podcast space, so the fact that you chose to hang out with me for just a little bit really does mean a lot. And if you got value out of today's episode, the best way that you can pay it forward is to like, subscribe, you can leave a comment, because believe it or not, that really does help composers just like you find the podcast. So I hope you've had an amazing week, and I know and believe that you're going to have an awesome week next week. How do I know that, friends? Because I trust and believe that the universe has amazing plans just for you. Until next time, peace. The 52 Cues podcast is copyright 2025 818 Studios, all rights reserved. The music played on the podcast is copyright of their respective owners and is used with permission and for educational purposes only. For more information, including joining the community, submitting your cue for review, or becoming a member subscriber of 52 Cues, head over to 52cues.com.